thing on. All right, hello everyone. We're gonna get started. Welcome to our data meeting for the month of August. I hope if you had a little bit of a break after our finalization last month that you had a good break. Just some, whoops. Reminders to please mute your microphone. If you have a question, you can raise your hand. Please utilize the chat as well. I think Nicole's monitoring that, and Callista's also here for some support. Just a few changes on the agenda for today from what we started. Yes, we are, I believe we are recording. Okay. So a few additions to the agenda that we sent out. And as usual, we will be recording this, sending out the slides afterwards, and the notes along with that. So to start us off, we'll have Cliff talking about the Utrecht submissions for the upcoming school year.
All right, thank you. Welcome everyone. I'll go ahead and get us started off. So our Utrecht submissions for the next school year. Go ahead and switch slides for me. I'm going to do a bit of a recap going over a lot of what many of you may know, but if any of you have any areas that there's some missing information from or that you felt unsure about, this is again to try to reinforce that information. Repetition is often the best way to lock something into your memory. So I'll go ahead and get us started with a review of the end of the prior school year. We do our finalizing with the Utrecht data. And during the finalizer window, which is typically 2 weeks, we do want to open that earlier when available. We had hoped to be able to do that a little bit earlier this year, but due to some circumstances with working with other system requirements, we weren't able to do that, but we will be trying to do that again for further school years. And that's always going to be on our agenda to look towards doing, is whenever there's that opportunity, we want to share that opportunity with you to be able to give that data out to us a little bit earlier and work with your staff earlier in the month to be able to do that. We'll go over dates later through this, so I won't focus on that part yet. But the data corrections are what the finalizing is very much focused on, is that all the changes in Utrecht's collected data have to be completed by that finalizer window end date. So of course, preferably we want the corrections to happen throughout the entire school year and not just at the finalizing periods. But the finalizing period is where things are held accountable. and that they have to be corrected, and that if they are not corrected, then there's the inability to finalize the data or have it accepted by the state, and that we have to work with that and work with you on it to get it to that point. History updates. All the requests for changing Utrecht's data historically can no longer be submitted. This gives time for USBE to make all the final updates. And then we get into resolving all the fatal level 1 errors, the warnings. If anyone is curious about that, the level 2 errors or level 1 warnings, those are not required to be resolved, but they are still suggested to be resolved, or at least reviewed and approved that it's not going to affect your students' data. We make presumptions with the warnings that they are things which will make a change for the student, an impact for them if they're not correct. But we don't have 100%. There's not every instance where that is accurate. So we don't make it a fatal. We just leave it to you to know there's risk. So considering those warnings as risk areas in your students, that's definitely the right move to take it and not optional. We don't require them to all be corrected, but that's also with passing on that risk to the LEAs to understand and to acknowledge that if it's not correct, that you will correct it for the student's sake. Then we have finalizing, takes a snapshot of the relevant data for each school and district. Refinalizing is available up to the end of the finalizer window. So you can finalize, day 1, and then you can realize that some changes that came in from another school are going to change what you've got going, and you're going to need to redo that. And that does happen. And that's one of the reasons why you need to plan to be involved throughout the entire finalizer window, is that even if you get everything done early, it doesn't mean that there's not side effects from potential students that are in other schools that are associated still based off of students that are also going to your school. So that's an area to be aware of and to keep in mind, to not just walk away, or that could impact those not getting resolved. As far as if the window is not met, then an extension can be requested on a day-to-day basis. The extensions have to be granted by the superintendency, and they can also carry risk of penalties. So for sure, if the scenario comes in and it's just negligence, I would say you're at a pretty high risk of having a penalty for not being able to finalize your data at that time. And it also turns into past penalties, but the ability to continue to work with an SIS, it puts your SIS systems at risk if you're not able to do it. And if that's been, goes out to the SIS is the complication. We just have to review and work with all these on an individual case scenario, and keep in mind that all of the decisions that we're making are for the student safety of getting the best education possible here in the state of Utah, and that our goal is to work with you and to do our best to help you get all this right. All right, go ahead to the next slide. Finalizing Utrecht's data, the schools need to make sure that the finalized data has been finalized correctly. Just again, a bit of redundancy here. Then after collecting the data, make sure that the data collected has finished processing before finalizing the data. So this is just a little bit about the actual process, and if you're the person that's pulling the trigger, that you can't collect and finalize at the same time and expect to have it work out right. So before you pull that trigger for finalizing, make sure that it's not during the hour that you scheduled to do your collections, or that it's not in the middle of a collection. All of that can mess up the process and cause you to need to refinalize. Check the dates and time on the collection, make sure that they are all in sync and finished before finalizing the data. After collections are started, it can take over an hour or more, depending on the size of your school or district, to finish the processing. And do not assume that the data has finalized. Check and make sure that the data has finalized. Be confident that you've completed that process, that it shows on your overview page that it was finalized as of the time that you expected it to finalize, especially if you do more than one finalization during that window. Just helpful hints to make sure that it's accurate to the best of your knowledge. LEAs are responsible for finalizing the data. I think I've indicated throughout this. Once finalized, this is an area that I feel that we're all still working on, or I shouldn't say all, but some of us are still working on getting exactly right, and that's deleting our schedule once we have finalized. As would make sense, if it's your final collection, at that point, you don't actually want to keep doing more collections. If you feel that you're going to do this as my first finalization, and I'm going to do more finalizations, it's okay for you to continue doing the collections for that short duration of time. But I would say if you are going to go that route, you should also still be planning on making that choice, that you're ensuring that you're going to do another finalization. If we get out of sync with that, it can affect reporting. We don't want to collect data that isn't going to go into the finalization, and we don't want to collect data after that. So please try to go out and pause, if not delete, your schedules as soon as you've made your finalization that you believe to be final. And again, a full delete by the end of the finalizer period. So that would be on July 7th. Go ahead to the next slide. The finalizer submission deadlines for school year 2024, due to weekends and our typical goal to try to always be on the 7th of each of these months. These are slightly adjusted due to that. So we'd be looking at October 9th, which is a Monday, due to October 7th falling on a weekend. And as a note, the historic update requests are due by September 25th. I know some of you have already started sending in those historic updates for school year 2024. So we do commit to getting them done if they're received by September 25th. And if they're not received by that point, you can make a request, but it's not ensured that we can actually make that happen for you anymore. So please do your best to adhere to that, as there isn't any guarantees after that date. The next is December 7th, which is a Thursday. And then we've got the historic update requests due by November 23rd. And then the end of the year is going to be July 8th, which is Monday, due to July 7th falling on a weekend. The historic update requests there will be due by June 24th. Go to the next slide. In between the school years, like we've recently been up until about 10 days ago, that we were done with our finalization period, and it moves into a lot of time that the state needs to actually work with all this information, get the next school year set up. And that's what I'm going to go into here. So we've got internal USB-E steps that are taken after the finalizer window is closed. Utrex, the data warehouse, SSID are all typically unavailable for at least 6 to 10 days after the end of the finalizer period, depending on the work that's required on our side. And that's a variable, so you will need to listen in to when those do become available again. SSID specifically is very much tied to our Cactus system. And when Cactus is down, SSID is in a read-only mode. So that's one benefit here of the SSID system is still during this outage period time, you can still read from the SSID system to verify information. You just can't provide anything new until the Cactus system is back up. And then once we get the Utrex system also back up. Then we have daily collections that, as I said, are meant to be stopped, deleted, and they do not start again until the next school year is in place. USB provides that date each year once it's determined, typically. And this is a goal that I have and plan to adhere to within our Utrex team is to get that by August 1st. We met that goal still this year. We do have the hopes, like I had mentioned before, to be able to get things out even earlier than that. We want to do our best and to share any opportunity with you. And if we can give you an extra, week of time to start that early, we're going to try to do that for you. But we are committed to getting that done by the 1st of August. If there are any detriments that come up that would push that date out further, there will definitely be communication on that. But you should plan for August 1st as the time that Utrex should be rolled over into the new school year each year, unless other communication has been given out to you. Okay, looks like I had a mistake in there. October 9th is a holiday, so the deadline would need to be the 10th. What holiday is October 9th? Sorry, that is a miss on my part. Columbus Day, okay. All right, good catch, I agree. Export transfer load. We refer to this process plenty here internally at USB-E, and you may hear us throwing out this in discussion with you, an ETL. That's what that stands for. And that's really just a movement of the data from one system to another system. And this is where we're taking that finalized data that's been audited and reviewed by our data and statistics team. Any corrections which were determined are made, and then it gets past all of our auditing and it's ready to be finalized, finalizing the finalized data into our data warehouse. So that's when we actually transfer that with that export transform load into its permanent resting place with the data warehouse, which is where our reporting and financials and other systems rely on for completely accurate data. The Utrex rollover, Utrex has to be set up with a new manifest for each school year. And again, your collections have to be set up for each school year. So after you've deleted the one, if you didn't delete it, it actually still wouldn't be viable for the next school year. So that's another reason in towards just doing a full delete, is that we do need a brand new one for each school year that aligns up with the current manifest. And a manifest is essentially our clearinghouse specification. So all of the different fields that we request in object formats that we request them, That's what that manifest is that we put any of our updates in for that new school year onto that. This aligns it and gets that school year ready to go and ready to be collected. Go ahead to the next slide. Start of the next school year, reestablishing data connections. Each school determines their own start date for their school year. It's not determined by USBE. We don't have a determined deadline date that has to be done that I'm aware of. It's pretty open. Some schools, I believe, have already even started before August 1st. And those are special case scenarios that may need to reach out and talk to us about how to best interact with us prior to that school year rolling over and being started for the state to collect your data. Quick tidbit on that is that your SIS system can operate just fine without sending us that data. You can still function in a lot of ways without passing that data to us for that duration of time. And then once the school year is available, then we can start getting synced up to be able to work with state aligned programs and assessments and things like that that are driven off of that getting to us at the state level. Each school and or their SIS must have their data set up for the next school year before scheduling and starting collections. Again, that's mostly given. The UTREX clearinghouse specification gives precise details for what is required for accurate data. It updates throughout the year. So even though I had said that we try to get it lined up to start the year, we have legislation that goes on throughout the year. We look for improvements that go throughout the year to better what we collect for our students. So we will need to keep in sync with any updates that we have on that. And you can reach out to us if you have any questions on how to get that and how to stay up to date with that. But it is available on our webpage from the UTREX link on the USBE public website. So again, those specifications will indicate any changes that are going to be in place for the next school year and potentially changes which need to be implemented as soon as possible. So that's the lovely thing about legislation is sometimes they don't tell us we're going to give everybody time to go out and make the changes before we say that it's needed. So we catch what's needed and required. We make it available and try to get everyone back into alignment. We try to keep things in as warnings, giving durations of time for legislative requirements to be met by your SIS systems. And then we'll turn them over into fatals at a point that we've been able to find adoption, or if we have any legislative requirement date-wise that does that. So I'm kind of skipping into that next part there, covering over that, but that there isn't a determined time that we have for that. There has been some talk in the past of trying to provide, you know, all the way up to 18 months for changes that were very complex changes for SIS systems. But the plan is that we try to make all these things as simple as we can and as easy for everybody to match to. And we want to get feedback if we're running into anything that even gets near that level of complexity for an SIS to adhere to. So please try to keep feedback with us in communication to where we can know if something that we're doing is very complicated and see if we can give you any feedback on how that can be a little less complicated for your matching that legislative requirement. Sadly to say though that that doesn't include any changing of the requirement itself. It is very solid. Each school will need to start a new daily collection schedule to be sent to UTREX, which I'd also already covered. Go ahead to the next screen. With the start of the school year, at the beginning of your school year, collection should be set up and started as soon as the data and statistics lets you know with an email that it's safe to start collections. This year, I think we'd sent that out on July 31st. So we barely beat our goal of August 1st and got it out, midday the day before. But that's when that email went out. So if you're wondering what that would look like and you didn't get it, please reach out to us and let us know. And that would mean that you didn't have your email address on that admin list that we had sent that information out on. And we can try to get you on for follow-up emails. Your database should be ready for the new fiscal year before beginning the new school year's collections. At the start of each year, there is a new manifest for what data UTREX collects. A new schedule is required to be set up and align with the latest manifest version. As you can see on the screenshot here, we've got a submission date of July 2022, school year 2022, and the expiration ends July 31st of 2023. And all of our manifests are set up in a similar fashion to where we never roach into the next school year. They always have an expiration date at latest the end of the school year. So there'll always be a new collection needed, and there'll always be a new manifest for every school year. Go to the next slide. To set up your collections, you can use the data gateway to go to the data collector. I've got an indicator there coming in from the UTREX menu item, and then under other systems, you've got the data collector there. From the data collector, use the link add new scheduled collection indicated there. And if you do already have one, you can use the manage scheduled collections in the sidebar menu. Go to the next screenshot. Setting up a collection schedule. The start time needs to be rounded to the hour. The scheduled action to collect, validate, and submit if no errors. If you do select something different, it can cause your data to not get all the way through into UTREX. Specifically, if you don't have the submit, if you just did collect and validate, it wouldn't actually get loaded. You'd get feedback on it. The validation would return back any errors that you have, but it wouldn't get loaded. And that this is the menu selection item that we'd like for that to be set to. If we find collections which aren't set to that, we may go in and make those corrections to help get your collection to adhere to these requests. But again, that's not our responsibility to go out and make those corrections. But you may find that we are extra helpful at times in trying to help get that into alignment. We have do not select the skip or pause buttons. So we don't want either of those two to be selected. The collections continue even after finalizing data for October 1st and December 1st. Those are considered mid-year. Those finalizer periods are not the end of any schedules. The end is only at the end of the school year. After finalizing at year end, the managed collection setup needs to be deleted. Go to the next screen.
Just 1 second. There's a question in the chat asking why rounded to the hour.
It's probably a good question. I would say that it's mostly just for adherence and expectations for putting things through. But I can tell you that I don't go through and enforce that they're not rounded to the hour. It's just a recommendation, really. So, Paula has history and knows that Pearson wrote it that way, that they requested for it to be at the end of the hour or design something that expects it to be, or maybe auto rounds it. I'm not sure.
Thank
Good question though. Thank you. Setting up collections reoccurrence. So this is on the sidebar when you're setting up those collections, that you want to set that up to daily and to include weekdays and weekends. We do also go out and look for this information daily and have created some internal tasks and systems of monitoring to try to ensure that we know when collections aren't working correctly and can try to be more attentive to that and assistive with it. So if those aren't checked, that does impact our ability to support those collections. And it's also a requirement. So if we see that those aren't checked, then that's something that we'll also go in and try to get brought into adherence. Go to the next screen. And if you have any problems with any of this, as many things, please utilize our help desk system. And you can do that through the help desk ticket at helpdesk.schools.utah.gov. Go to the next screen. All right, so was there anything that anybody wanted to bring up before I hand off? Okay, go ahead, Riley.
Thank you. So I'm just here to provide a summary of how the year-end upload for school year 2023 went. So thank you everyone so much for all your hard work, long hours, and reviewing, fixing, submitting the data. Our data and statistics team completed courtesy data reviews for every LEA prior to the June data meeting. Please make sure if there's been any changes with personnel who are dealing with UTREC submissions or finalizing, if people change, if they move, leave, you get someone new, please make sure to update your UTREC's contact information. We found a couple LEAs hadn't updated their information and weren't getting, the LEAs weren't getting the necessary reviews and emails that were required for finalizing their data. So please, if there's any changes, update your UTREC's contact information. And also, as a reminder, getting things done early ensures that there's a smoother submission process. Technical problems with the SIS systems and UTRECs may and do occur. We had a lot of last minute issues getting down to the deadline. And so ensuring that we get our data in as early as possible and fixing and cleaning up throughout the year, all our data will help the finalizing period go much smoother. And again, the submission deadline is always around the exact same time every year, so plan accordingly with vacations and holidays. Someone from your LEA who has UTREC's powers must be the one to finalize your data. No one from UTREC's or from USDE can do that for you. So please, again, ensure you've got those dates that Cliff shared earlier written down, and that there are arrangements made so that the data can get finalized. So we did the courtesy data reviews earlier this year during our April data conference meeting. LEAs requested that we provide the reviews earlier. And in looking at whether or not it was helpful, we found that the timing may have been a little bit too early. So most of the LEAs had not finished their school year when we did the reviews. And for example, membership was not reported at 180 days yet in UTRECs for students. So we flagged this item on most reviews, and normally this would not be a concern if we had done the reviews later. That caused a little bit of confusion. essentially because the school year wasn't over, we didn't have an idea of whether or not not having 180 days of membership was an issue or not. And then there were also some validations like reading on grade level and early numeracy interventions that don't trigger until the last day of school. So those didn't actually show up for most of the reviews that we did. And we do sound like broken records, but it's because we come into some of these issues every time. So it's important that LEAs submit their year-end data on time. The year-end deadline is always July 7th by 5 p.m. unless that date falls on a weekend or holiday. This year, most LEAs finalized on time. There were 2 LEAs that received extensions to refinalize their data after our team found errors in the finalized data that affected funding. And all LEAs ended up being completely finalized by Saturday, July 8th. And the ETL and the data audits were completed by USBE in the following weeks. And the year-end data for school year 2023 is now available for official use. There's just a few notes on the USBE processes before UTREX rolls over, and Cliff touched on this a little bit, but some more details. So after the year-end data is finalized in UTREX, there's many steps at USBE that need to happen before the rollover to the school year, to the new school year can happen. So this year, the ETL had to be run multiple times because data and statistics found some issues in the audit that we performed of the data. And this wasn't due to issues with data submitted by LEAs, but it was an internal problem in a script that was run during IT processes after the UTREX submission. And this took many days of research and many teams involved at USBE to fix this. And it ended up delaying when the UTREX team could start working on the new school year rollover. And as a reminder, there's no official date for when the school year rolls over in UTREX. There's that internal goal that Cliff has for his team, but the ETL data audits and IT processes take time. So each school year might vary on what needs to get done before the LEAs can roll over. And this year, as the ETL and audit processes took longer, and the UTREX team still aimed to have the rollover done as soon as possible. We sent out an email notification on Monday, July 31st, notifying every LEA that the UTREX, that they're able to roll over in UTREX to school year 2024. And just as a reminder, LEAs should not roll over in UTREX before the official email notification comes from USBE, because submitting data for a new school year before the UTREX is ready will cause major issues. And then a reminder about the year-end reports. We share this information during training, but find that sometimes more reminders can be helpful. So please make sure to download all your year-end UTREX reports the day you are done finalizing. And archive reports aren't typically available until after July, so LEAs should not be depending on these archive reports. And the link to download the finalized reports from the finalizer window still does not work, but the way you access these reports is to go to the UTREX year-end reports and then download all 4 reports: school summary, consolidated membership, transfer student list, and Scram ESY. And you can download the PDF, you can download the CSV, you can download both. The more you can download, the better for you. We've also found that some LEAs have found it useful to also download and save the examined data file from their latest submission that they finalized, and that's on the UTREX overview page. There were a few instances where it was really helpful that the LEA had their examined data file from a previous finalized submission, and there were also some instances where it would have been helpful for that file to have been saved. So as much as you can download and save will be helpful if there's any issues in the future.
Hey, Riley.
Yeah.
Just one note on that point that talks about the link on the finalizer window not working. I got this question a lot. So that link that's directly on the UTREX overview in the finalize box, it works in the sense that it leads you to the archived reports, but it doesn't lead you directly to your year-end reports that you just finalized. And so that's why we say to just go to the submission period. So in this case, year-end, and download all the UTREX reports, because that link brings you to the archived reports, which if you do it the day you finalize, they're not ready yet. So that's why we tell you to go directly to where the year-end reports or whatever submission you're doing and download them there.
Great, thank you for that clarification. And then Cliff also touched on this, but after you finalize your data, please remember to turn off your daily collections at year end. This should happen after you finalize in July. So once you're satisfied that your year-end data is finalized and you're not intending on refinalizing, you should not continue to submit daily collections to UTREX. And this is only at year end. During the October and December submissions, you leave your automatic collections running. And if you continue to submit after you finalize your year-end data and you didn't download your year-end reports the day that you finalize, it's possible that your data in the UTREX reports have changed, because UTREX is a dump and load system. So it doesn't know what you submitted 2 days before. If that's when you finalize your data and you've still submitted collections, it's going to have whatever you've just submitted. So some of the findings from the year-end data that our team looked at, and specifically the new fields. So enrollment validation type, we found that all LEAs had these data reported at year-end, and the S1 403 validation was updated to trigger as a fatal error before year-end. For early numeracy intervention, all LEAs with K through 3 enrollment reported early numeracy intervention data at year end, and this validation was also updated to trigger as a fatal error before year end. For student physical address 1, which includes student physical city, physical state, physical zip code, all LEAs had these data reported at year end, and S1.001 and .05 validations on these fields were also updated to trigger as fatal errors before year end. And then the SRO, student resource officer, or school resource officer, and LEO, law enforcement officer fields, which include the physical arrest flag, search and seizure flag, criminal citation flag, non-criminal citation flag, and retaliation flag. All LEAs that reported incident data had these data reported at year end. And the incident association record validations were updated to trigger as fatal errors also before year end. Some more findings for the 3 new absence fields. So due to issues with SIS systems and data quality in school year 2022, we did not populate these data in UTREX. So school year 2023 is considered the first year of data collection. However, while LEAs from all SISs reported data, there were 4 LEAs reporting zeros for all 3 new absence fields. And there are also some known issues with the absence due to suspension field. So data weren't submitted in this field, or they were just submitted as all zeros by LEAs on Aspire. And PowerSchool reported that the values for this field did not line up correctly at the student level. So the UTREX team will be looking into that issue. But as these issues are being addressed, please make sure that you're reporting accurate data in all 3 of the absence fields on the S1 or student record in UTREX. And the S1 401 and 402 validations on these fields were updated to trigger as fatal errors before year end. And then there's a newer exit code of CB. This is not new this year, but there were 5 student records that were received with the CB exit code in eTrex. Last year, there was a problem with fatal errors on the CB exit codes, but it has been fixed. And then some more findings with regards to the RA code. There were RA codes submitted for students whose cohort was not 2023. And so of the about 188 students submitted with the RA codes in school year 2023, 137 are not in the 2023 cohort, which means that the majority of these students are being coded incorrectly. And we can't reassign cohorts for students who have already been included in a 4-year cohort rate. So these students can still work towards and earn the alternate diploma. But unfortunately, the window has passed for being able to reassign the cohort and have the student included as a graduate with the alternate diploma in a 4-year cohort rate. So it might be best to report these students with RT instead of RA. And just a note here that please use RA for students in grade 11 or 12 who meet the criteria listed in Board Rule R277-419 and R277-705 for continuing to enroll beyond the student's cohort year and who are on a path to receive an alternate diploma. So if RA is used, the student must have the 1% flag marked in the Associated Scram record, and the current school year must be equal to the student's cohort year or reassigned cohort year. If a student is submitted with an RA code, their cohort will be reassigned. And once a student's cohort year has been reassigned, the only way the student can be included as a graduate in the 4-year cohort graduation rate is with the GA code. And if that was a lot of information and there's lots of questions, you can reach out to Callista and David about these codes. If there's not any questions, we'll jump back to Cliff, who will talk about getting feedback about our submission.
All right, doesn't sound like there's any feedback, so I'll jump in. Thank you. Go ahead to the next slide. I want to start with a little bit of an overview of our data collection, and that, again, we're looking to get feedback on our overall process with this, your experience with it, and also kind of do a bit of level setting as far as our perspective from it and our needs with the data, and are trying to help make everything work out for both our LEAs and for our students. So to start that off, I'm going to get into what is the data collection for. USBE collection data is used for supporting the following: assessments such as RISE and ACT, student programs such as Child Nutrition Program and Special Education, and then school, district, and state funding. When we have fatal errors, it affects one or more of these. Sadly, the biggest impact is on our students not getting our best efforts in typically the first 2, which is where they feel the most impact. I go to the next slide. Fixing fatal errors only at the deadline. The finalizer period is like what teachers do at the end of terms, allowing for catch-up work that should be done throughout the period. We know that this is not the most successful way for our students, and we know that it is not the most successful way for LEAs to support our students. When fatal errors are not resolved until the finalizer period, it has already impacted the students, the support and testing that they get. I can attest to that. I already have collections which are coming through and fatals which are preventing assessments with people that are already trying to get assessments, even now before many schools have started. And those assessments just simply cannot go out until those fatal errors are resolved. So it's not just a one-time event to get them solved, and it's not just on occasion when it's convenient. It really needs to be something that we realize it has an impact every day, and that all of us feel that impact and hear about that impact in one way or another, of the students, again, not getting our best results due to those fatal errors not being resolved, which that's again what fatal errors do, is they prevent loading of the student's data, which means that it can't go out for any additional services. They don't get to assessments. They don't get to any of these other programs. There can be other factors which are involved in that. So I'm not saying that everything is only one factor, and if the fatals are resolved, then everything else works perfect. But it simply is a sure prevention of those students from going through. At that point, if we just do it at the end, on the October 1st through 7th, December 1st through 7th, and July 1st through 7th, then it's really only being completed for the financial needs of our agencies and less for our students. And that's not the perspective that we want here in Utah. Go ahead to the next slide. What can we do about it? USBE is discussing the entire process internally and determining ways that we can direct changes from the state level to have these issues addressed quickly and not last minute. We're asking you to do the same, looking for what efforts districts can make, what feedback suggestions you can share to help us all give our students the best support that we can. Next slide. I'd like for everyone to take part in this solution. This isn't just a USBE fix. This isn't just us wanting to enforce. I feel there's opportunity from all of us. We're all very educated and very capable at our jobs. And I hope that we can all look at this from the perspective for what will best help our students. So I want to help with this by sending out a survey to all LEA admins to collaborate with us on this process of improvement. It's not limited to just the LEA admins. If there's perspective from your staff or your students that can contribute to bettering this process, we want to hear about your experiences with the process from any perspective, as anyone can have a great idea, and we want to know what those are, to where we can try to include them in and come to a level of ownership across the board for everyone involved in the process. So the questions that I'm going to be putting out in this survey are: what has worked and made sense? What doesn't work or make sense? What changes and actions could be considered to give our students the best experience? These are intentionally non-directive and non-prescriptive. I could do another round of this if these don't really get the actionable results that we're looking for, and I can try to drill into things which are more prescriptive. But I want to at least start with this round, very open-ended questions to where we can try to get you to think about it and to consider what those are and what all of our opportunities are to take part in this solution. And we'll be sending out that email potentially today, and if not, by the end of the week. Go ahead to the next slide, and I think that covers what I have. Thank you, everyone, and if anybody has any questions, feel free to jump in now before David takes over.
All right. Thanks, Cliff. And feel free to use the chat too, if there's no questions right now, but David will next be walking through the graduation rate for cohort 2023 training.
Okay, go ahead and go to the next slide, please. So we've already, this slide is a little out of date now because we've now finished running the grad rate. We'll be working to create the Move It files and be sending them out this probably tomorrow, and working with Cliff's team to get the report that's on the data gateway updated as well. Please make sure that everybody who needs to see these graduation reports can see them so we can make sure that the data is as accurate as possible. Next slide. The adult education data for 2023 has been submitted, and the report is on the gateway. This shows how to get there. Please review and check all the exit codes to make sure that they are accurately being reported. Let us know if there are any concerns. Next slide. So how do we make updates to graduation data? To make updates to prior year records, they either have to be done through an S1X or an historical update. Historical update requests are due 2 weeks prior to the submission deadline that will be coming up in October. Use S1X record updates to update graduation data for students that are not currently enrolled in your LEA. These updates, of course, may not be reflected in the graduation rate preview report because it's not a live report that gets updated. It's a point in time report. If you have any questions, though, to make sure that it got in, you can contact Callista or myself, and we can check to help you make sure that it's accurate. Next slide. All right, so how is the graduation rate calculated? These are the different outcomes that are possible: graduate, dropout, other completer, continuing student, and some based on their codes would be excluded. So it's a pretty simple calculation. The number of graduates divided by the total number of students in the 4 areas except for minus excluded. There's a link here on the slide that will take you to a list of completion statuses and exit codes and the outcomes that will come based on each of those codes. Next slide. All right, so cohort graduation rate, again, that just shows how it's calculated. Here's how, very similar to the graduation rate, this is how we calculate the dropout rate. It's just the dropouts divided by those, but they will not sum up to 100%. So just be aware of that if you try to combine graduation and dropout rates. So next slide. These are some codes that will, if unchanged, will turn into a dropout. The graduation pending, exited to take the GED, and the exited to adult education. And then EX unknown and withdrew. So these are ones that you'll probably want to make sure that you update if necessary, especially in the case of graduation pending. That's one that if they graduated and you leave it at that, it will show as a dropout. AE, of course, connected to the USI report. Next slide. These are also some continuing students who may turn into dropouts. They'll become dropouts if the student doesn't enroll in the next as a school of record. If it's no, the graduation rate, it ignores that record. So if you see somebody that you believe shouldn't be because they should have been on they should have transferred somewhere else. You'll probably want to contact that LEA to ensure that that they mark it correctly. The next slide. So after the finalization in October, we'll rerun the cohort for 2023, and we will then put out a new preview sometime around the end of November, and then the final graduation report will be published in December. If you have any questions, again, please contact Callista or myself. We'll help any way we can. Next slide. And that's it. Thank you. If you have any questions, let me know.
And one note, this is Callista, I was just gonna say, we do plan to have further training in the upcoming meetings before October, specifically on how to do updates. So on how to do S1X record updates in your SIS, and then how to submit historical update requests. So we get a lot of questions on that. And so for people that are wondering about that, just know that we will provide training before October on those things.
Great, thank you both. Next, Willie will be talking about the incident and discipline data.
Hi all, I'll be going over those. So next slide, please. So for the infraction types that you can put into UTREX, currently, language in the UTREX specifications is being updated for additional clarification, especially since some LEAs have reached out to us. So for number 6, harassment, sexual is going to be updated to also say unwelcome sexual conduct at the end. Number 9, robbery or theft, meaning unauthorized possession. And then bullying, cyberbullying, or hazing for number 24. And particularly the latter one's going to be important. So I'll talk about that on the next slide. So in the future, we are going to actually have 2 new infraction types that will be added, so that there will be 3 bullying related codes. In other words, cyberbullying and hazing will be added as their own codes. Again, this is a work in progress, and they'll be separate from bullying. If you need definitions for those specifically, they're provided right there on the slide. The estimated time frame for this process is up to 18 months. And what we recommend right now is, as we're beginning this process, to differentiate cyberbullying, hazing from bullying itself. You start reviewing your LEA policies, make sure they specifically outline cyberbullying and hazing if they haven't already, and then start working with your SIS systems so that you can actually document these distinctions and report these incidences, even if UTREX is not ready to collect them this year. But ideally, if things go fairly smoothly, we'll get these ready, in some time in the future. But we will definitely provide you updates during these LEAD meetings during the school year. Other than that, the new law enforcement fields that came into effect, this is just reporting some of the data we collected. So last year was the first year that we were required to collect that from code. No incidences were submitted for other law enforcement activity, but search and seizures had the highest incident count and student counts. And then criminal citation had the second highest count. And then you can see the non-criminal citation of physical arrests. Next slide. We also have a new retaliation flag that was required. These are ordered in the highest count by offender. You'll notice the numbers are interesting, where you can have 28 offenders, 2 that are both an offender or victim, and then 9 students that were a victim of physical assault. The reason why one reason why these numbers may look different, again, just a reminder, when you have an incident, there could be multiple students. or a student could also be responsible for a number of incidences. And just to give context, one of the incidences that was marked as a physical assault had 3 offenders, and 1 student was marked as both an offender and victim. And, just take a guess there, something may have happened so that obviously that there are 4 students involved, but that's why these numbers look a little not 1-to-1. Next slide. Sorry, slide. So use of the other infraction type. In this past year, 2022-2023, other became the most frequently used infraction type, making up for over a quarter of what was reported. Last year, it was about a 5th or the 3rd most used infraction code type, tiny typo, in the 2021-2022 school year. And so we took a deeper look, and about 30,000 entries of other were entered, and at least 4,800 were determined to be mislabeled. Again, just, to better serve our students and also for our data collection accuracy records, others should really only be used when known infraction type is available to accurately represent the incident. So for example, I've noticed that some of the descriptions that were included, many incident descriptions combined several infraction types together. Please try to enter the primary infraction into UTREX that you think best sums up the incident. Next slide. So to give you the context of how many were mislabeled, at least 3,456 described an incident as altercation or fighting, but they classified it as other. LEAs, you can let your administrators know, whoever's inputting it, look at your LEA policy. Is it actually physical assault? Use the physical assault code. Or is it the fighting mutual altercation code? But at least 391 said that the incident involved bullying and or harassment, whether it was sexual or non-sexual. Again, we already have codes for that. Number 5, number 6, and 24. Please use those codes instead of other. 860 said disruptive behavior, disruption, inappropriate language, swearing. We have a code for disruption. And at least 108 LEAs entered threat and intimidation. And again, we have a code for threat and intimidation. Again, these are just some examples of how other has been used, and just try to clean up the identification of entering primary infractions, and we would really appreciate that. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Willie. If there's any questions on that, feel free to put that in the chat or reach out via email. We're going to move on to Maureen, who will be talking about assessment rostering and LEA data.
We can go to the next slide. Hi, everyone. My name's Maureen. I'm from the assessment department. And I just thought I'd give you a quick overview of what LEA data we use in assessment rostering, and I'd point you to some resources in case you might need them. So the first thing is, Cliff touched on this earlier. Fatal UTREX errors will keep students from rostering for their summative and formative assessments. If a student has a fatal error, they are not going to get rostered for an assessment. We use cactus IDs for teacher cactus IDs for course-based assessments to associate a student with a course teacher. If your courses have out-of-date cactus IDs, that can affect rostering for an assessment. So you might want to just give a check, make sure your cactus IDs are up to date on your courses. We use SCRAM record details, particularly 1% status, to roster students to DLM assessments. That's the alternative assessment we give to 1% students. An inaccurate indication in that 1% status can cause a student to be rostered for the wrong assessment. They might be rostered for RISE instead of DLM, or the other way around, they'll be rostered for DLM and not the appropriate assessment. For course-based assessment, we use those core codes from courses to roster students. We have lists of core codes that are available that you can check out. It's arranged by assessment, which assessment uses what core codes. There's a link down at the bottom to the assessment and accountability resources page, which gives you those core code lists. For those course-based assessments, also we look at course exit date and course entry date. If a student is not actively enrolled in a course, they are not rostered for those course-based assessments. So make sure your entry dates and exit dates are correct. They must also be within a school exit date and entry date. If a student is enrolled in a course before they're enrolled in school, they aren't going to roster for an assessment. Oh, and I see Kim has mentioned in there also. I'll get to that in 1 second, Kim, about Utah Compose. For grade-based assessments, we look at your school exit and entry dates. A student must be enrolled in school in order to be rostered for an assessment. So those school exit and entry dates are also important. So if you're checking for your students' fatal errors on that UTREX overview page, if you look right over to your right, there is the Utah Compose extract. If you have a stale Utah Compose extract, there will be a big red button. You can refresh your extract there, and then fresh student information will flow into Utah Compose. I have two resources to tell you about on the assessment and accountability resources page. The core code list, which I mentioned before, they will tell you all of the core codes that will roster a student for an assessment. They are listed by priority in case you may have a student enrolled in more than one course. And also the student assessment rostering manual is on that page too. It gives you all the business rules for student rostering. It gives you the tiebreakers for students that are enrolled in more than one school. And let's see, George, you wanted to know resetting Utah Compose. It's just right on your UTREX overview page. If you look up your UTREX submission, it's just in a box off to the right. You click the button and it refreshes. And I'm sure Kim will cover that at our assessment directors meeting as well. So that is the quickest overview you're going to get for assessment rostering. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me. I can help you with any and all questions regarding assessment rostering. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Maureen. So now we're going to move on to special ed UTREX validation updates from LEA.
First, Maureen, did you see that question in the comments about resetting Utah Compose? Is that something you can address, or should Kim address it?
I just did.
Oh, okay. Okay, so in the previous months, I announced some upcoming special ed
Malia.
Yeah.
Oh, there you are. Okay.
Okay, so in throughout this spring, and then at the spring data conference, I announced some upcoming or new special ed validations. A couple of them we were going to wait until we rolled over to this new school year to put them into effect. So just wanted to kind of go over those again. Next slide, please. So this one, the level 2 essential elements inconsistency. Since it's just a warning, we went ahead and made this live last year. We didn't wait until we rolled over to the new school year to put this in effect. So a lot of you may already be familiar with this from end of year last year. But basically, when a student is enrolled with an essential elements course, but they don't have any Scram records where it's marked 1%, that's when this warning triggers. Next slide. So if you get this warning, what you need to do is work with your special ed director to check whether check if the data is entered correctly, because that's kind of the low hanging fruit. If they just need to have their 1% status marked, easy fix. Maybe there was a typo in the course code entered. Also could be a really easy fix to fix that. On the other hand, it could be, so the way the validation checks, your LEA doesn't have to have a Scrum record on for a dual enrolled student. It could be the other LEA that has the Scrum record, but you could be providing them an essential elements course. And as long as that student is 1%, then you shouldn't, it's okay for you to be providing that essential elements course, and you shouldn't get the warning. So if you are, just work with that other LEA to make sure that the Scrum record has that 1% status marked. And then finally, if the student's not a student with a significant cognitive disability, the 1% students, and they're getting the warning, then you need to review the student's IEP to check whether the course assignments they've been given are appropriate. Next slide. So what is an appropriate course assignment? So if the student's IEP says that they should be taking a general education assessment, which is the RISE or UTAS Aspire Plus, then the student should be enrolled in general education courses. And for more questions about appropriate course assignments, you'll want to get a hold of Tracy Cooley. And then if it's more of just like a technical issue with the data and the validation, you can contact me as well. Okay, so this is one of the ones we were holding off until we rolled to the new school year to make this new fatal error live. So it's live now, and I think when I checked yesterday, there's only 3 students who are getting it. But it is a fatal error, so you want to look for these and you want to get them fixed ASAP, because it could mean that the IEP team has to meet and determine whether the 1% status is wrong or whether the disability type is wrong. Because these 2 disability types, emotional behavioral disorder and specific learning disability, are not compatible with the is 1% flag. And I can provide more detail about specifically why that is. It's written in the special education rules. So if you need more information about that, please go ahead and email me. Or otherwise, Tracy Gooley is also a good contact on this one. Next slide. Okay, so this one is another new one. It's just a warning. We're not making this a fatal because we know that that even if we did make it a fatal, you'd still run into parents who just don't want to share the phone number. However, we want you to do your best to try to get phone numbers entered. So if a student has a Scrum record, the phone number really shouldn't be blank. And that's because this is used by special education to facilitate monitoring of educational services provided to children with disabilities as required by federal law. And this is ultimately to benefit the kids. The monitoring is checking in with those families, with the kids, making sure that the special education services that they were provided met their needs. And so it's not just jumping through hoop things. We're really trying to make sure that we're improving our services. So please pass this information along to registrars as they're enrolling students for the current school year. Let them know that phone numbers for students with disabilities are not optional. We need accurate and up-to-date phone numbers in order to meet that federal monitoring requirement. Okay, and then one other validation update we made. So this was an existing validation on phone numbers. And what it used to do was it just checked the first three numbers of the phone number prefix, the 10-digit phone number prefix. And it just said those first three numbers can't be 000. And in fact, we could do a little more to make sure that the phone numbers that we're getting don't have typos or aren't just like completely bogus phone numbers. And so that's basically just checking to make sure that the phone number meets this North American numbering plan. And you can Google that and find more information about the North American numbering formats. But basically the format in the 10-digit number, there's two of the places, the first and the third, the first and the fourth place out of the 10 digits can only be digits 2 through 9. So if somebody types in a number that starts with prefix 101, it should trigger this validation error. The rest of the numbers can be any number 0 through 9. So this example, 801-178-7731 is going to trigger this error because that fourth place can only be digits 2 through 9. So the 1 is, we know for sure that this is a typo or a bogus phone number. Although caveat, this is new validation error that we just released, or validation, new change to the way this validation works. And we didn't quite get it totally right. It's currently is triggering on blank phone numbers, which it shouldn't be. It should only be triggering because blank phone numbers are allowed. So it shouldn't be triggering on blank phone numbers. It should only be triggering when there's a phone number entered. Then it should look to make sure that the phone number is numeric, has 10 digits, and meets the North American numbering plan. So we need to fix this ASAP because since it's a fatal on enrollment records, it'll block any enrollment record that doesn't have a phone number. And so we have a couple choices for making this a quick fix to make sure that students will end up on rosters. We can just quickly switch it over to be just a warning instead of a fatal until the time that we can get this fixed and working correctly. Or if we think we can get it working correctly really quickly, then we might just go that route. So just FYI, if you see that you're getting a fatal error on every single one of your students, not just students with and this is different rules than that new S1 406 rule, which only looks at students who have a scram record, and that one's only a warning. So anyway, if you're getting this one on every single one of your students because you don't have any phone numbers, be assured we are working on fixing this ASAP. And what do we do if parents simply refuse to give us a phone number? Like I said, that's why that S1 406 is only a warning, because we know you're going to encounter that situation. We're not going to turn it into a fatal where you're stuck between a rock and a hard place with now you're not able to submit this data, but you're also not able to convince the parent that they need to give this. Basically just try to appeal to them that the reason we need the phone number is for that monitoring requirement to make sure that the students are getting the best special education and related services that they need. Okay, next slide. Okay, so that's all. Let me know if you have any questions.
Great, thank you, Malia. Next, David is going to talk about some youth in custody updates.
Awesome. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dave Solomon. I'm an education specialist for the youth in custody team. And we are going to give a brief, very brief description on some of the updates that we look forward to seeing in UTREX. Next slide, please. Okay, so we're hoping that these updates will be accessible and completed by November of this year. So this is kind of like one of those teaser trailers into the exciting world of Utrex that we're looking forward to. So in Utrex, what we've done is we've gone through the document, and with us too in this meeting is Julia Armstrong. She is another education specialist, my colleague. And we went through this document and we saw that there needed to be some updates on some of the facilities that were currently being presented through the document in the Utrecht system. So that's what we did. We updated the JJYS facilities, as well as added treatment centers that we currently have students being placed or receiving services from in those districts. We also, the big part of the update is we added a new field for residential treatment centers to now be classified by district in Utrecht. And so really the goal behind adding this residential treatment center field is to be really, be able to clear some of the muddy water that sometimes when we're looking at data and we're looking to see where some of our kids are located throughout the state, that we have some more very specific ways to be able to track them and to be able to show what districts our students are being a part of. So we've added those residential treatment centers as part of that new field now in Utrecht. And so we're hoping that through being able to add that new field, update some of the old stuff and put the current stuff, definitions in there, that we'll be able to locate and know where our youth and our students are being served throughout the state of Utah. And so, yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Great, thank you, David. Now, Nicole is going to go through the 2024 proposed meeting schedule for our meeting.
Thanks, Riley. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for being here today. We just wanted to quickly go over dates for next year's LEA data meetings. You can go to the next slide, Riley. These are the dates the proposed dates for 2024. And we just wanted a little bit of feedback for the dates in May and August. So as you know, they're typically held the fourth Thursday of the month, with the exception of the dates highlighted in yellow here. And we know we can't accommodate everybody's schedule, but we're just hoping, since we're in August right now, maybe you can give us some feedback of, it works better at the beginning of the month or more towards the end of the month. We're not sure with school starting. So if you could give us a little bit of feedback for May 16th or the 23rd of next year, and then August, we're thinking the 8th. But again, if you can let us know if that works better, the beginning or later in the month, that would be awesome. You can put those notes in the chat, or you can feel free to email our team as well. And that's all I have. Thanks so much.
Great, thank you, Nicole. So yes, please feel free to provide that feedback in the chat, or like Nicole said, via email. This is the last slide for today. If there's any questions, feel free to raise your hand, since I think people are adding dates to the chat right now, or feel free to unmute yourself. But if not, we will get these slides, the recording, and the notes from today sent out to everyone ASAP. Is there anything else from data and statistics that we should say?
This is Calista. I would just say, as a reminder, if you haven't already, to make sure that you are submitting data for the new school year 23-24 in Utrecht, because it seems far away, but the October submission comes up quickly and we start looking at data in September. And so it's helpful if you can start seeing if there's any technical issues now with New Year submissions, and along with that, making sure to set up daily scheduled collections if you haven't already. And that's it. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Oh, we've got one question. I don't know what this means, so it's probably not for me. We received an email from our ALS department that I think meant there was a change to the threshold for when monitoring starts. Can someone speak to that? Does anyone on here from USDE have enough background
What,
to know what this is?
I'm wondering what ALS is, what the ALS department is.
Steven?
English learners. Okay, so we need a data steward works with.
Mhm.
Uh-huh.
Oh, sorry, my Siri is talking now. We will, I don't know if anyone's on this call right now, so is it all right if we find out and then include that in the notes? Can we send that out? Okay, great. Thank you. All right, if no more questions, see y'all next month. Thanks for coming.
If someone's still there, can you review what Kim said about going to the Utrex overview screen to reset Utah Compose?
I am still there. I don't know if Kim or Maureen is, but
Because I tried finding where that is and I can't spot it, and maybe I'm just looking in the wrong place. So
okay, so are you logged into Data Gateway and on
Yeah.
Utrex Overview?
yes, I am.
So it's my understanding, and Calista, maybe you can jump in, but if the option to reset is only if
On that Utah Compose.
yeah. So it's only
You know,
I
it
think-
just kicked me out of Data Gateway. So let me try
Okay.
logging back in again.
Well, I wonder if we've got to some student data first, but well, the student data is going in, but maybe for school to start.
I don't think that everyone gets that button unless it's stale. So if it's not stale, then you don't get the reset button, if that makes sense.
Not really, but
I think so. I guess and close to maybe jump in, but
because we've seen
yeah.
it before, that's why it's curious, and that makes sense. What you're saying is there's a problem with the data.
I think my understanding is that you'll only see the reset button there if the Utah Compose extract is stale. If it's not stale, you're not going to see the reset button there. You don't need to reset anything.
All right. So if
Yeah.
it's not there, we don't need to reset it.
Riley, I don't know for sure on that. I
Yeah, we'll
think someone
go down.
from assessment would have to verify for sure on resetting that.
Okay.
I'll reach out to Kim. Don't worry about it.
Perfect. Sounds good.
Hey, thanks.
Thank you.